Welcome to All Pro Football Data. My name is Jim Coburn. In today's episode, we're talking about Keon Coleman. We're going to talk about the Buffalo Bills' new rookie wide receiver in Keon Coleman. We're going to look at his pre-draft profile, team analysis, schedule analysis, and his week-by-week matchups to see what obstacles and opportunities await him in 2024. To learn more about my process in terms of all the stuff that I do, you can check the description box below. But with all this stuff out of the way, let's get to Keon Coleman. So first off, the setup. Keon Coleman was drafted by the Bills at pick 33 in this year's draft. The typical expectation or approximate value of a wide receiver selected at pick 33 since 1969 is 86.10 out of 100, meaning typically wide receivers selected at that spot are 86% better than the vast majority of NFL wide receivers. And Coleman's pre-draft profile is right in line with what is expected from an early second-round pick. So taking a look at offensive market share data for him, we're going to look at his profile in terms of how he projects here. His overall offensive market share was decent, 67% in terms of his receiving market share, 77 in terms of his total offensive market share, and then 72% in terms of touchdown market share. These are all the numbers that you pretty much want. He didn't hit the averages at the position, so the average for starters is typically in the 80 to high 70 percentile range in every single metric that I just mentioned. But these are still decent statistics nevertheless. He definitely hits at least above the Pro Bowl threshold and the All Pro threshold, or I should say starter threshold. So he definitely is in that range of possibilities there. Then, of course, you get to wide receiver efficiency scores. Based on his efficiency data, he wasn't the most efficient wide receiver. So he was average, is the best way to put it. His touchdowns per touch was about 60 percentile, and then his yards per reception was a little bit above 50 percentile. But again, he wasn't the most efficient wide receiver with the ball in his hands, which was sort of a concern that a lot of people have about him on film, is that, he kind of is 50-50. Sometimes he'll make a big play, sometimes he's not doing things that you thought he would easily be able to do, especially in terms of contested passes, stuff like that. But that's definitely something of mention, is that he wasn't the most efficient wide receiver. Then, of course, you get to athleticism traits. This is an area where he was kind of good in one area but bad in another, so, or at least average in the other, and that is his explosiveness. So he had 89 percentile, almost 90 percentile explosion score, which takes a look at vertical and the broad jump measured against his size, his mass density, and then his speed score was 42 percentile. So there usually is this, there's a lot of NFL evaluators on television that talk about the fact, well, if a guy has a really good explosion score, then he's going to have a great 40-yard dash. That is, it's not 100% wrong, but the vertical and the broad jump really has nothing to do with your ability to run fast. Okay, that's different muscle groups, different everything else like that. So again, I'm not trying to. Typically, if you have a good explosion and a good explosion score, you are considered a good athlete. I would say that much, but uh, just because you have a great explosion score doesn't mean you're going to run a fast 40. So again, that's a little bit of a myth in terms of that. However, in terms of his athleticism here, I don't really think it affects anything. The thing that he was really good in is the stuff that people love about him, and then the speed is definitely a little bit of a concern, but he's a possession wide receiver. I think if you view him as a possession wide receiver, you're not viewing him to be like a Tyreek Hill. You're viewing him to be sort of like an Allen Robinson before Allen Robinson kind of fell off a little bit, or Des Bryant. It would be kind of another example. That's kind of what you're looking for him to be. So I think that doesn't really hurt him. It's just he's a little bit of an old school wide receiver. The wide receivers are getting smaller and faster, so he's a little different from what normally is seen, but definitely a athleticism trait. His overall athleticism is something that could work at the NFL level. Then, of course, you get to adjusted production. This is by far the best aspect of him. His age score was good, his MSA rating was decent, and his pass score was also decent. These are adjusting for his age, his level of competition, and the team that he was on. So all those traits, are basically adjusting for those specific variables, and he was pretty productive and pretty good for his age and for level of competition and and the team that he was on at Florida State. And then, of course, let's talk about this. So, what makes Coleman an attractive fantasy option? Because I definitely, it was a little bit of a mixed bag. If you've been following along at home, Keon Coleman has a bit of a mixed bag in terms of his data profile. I would say this much about him. His overall EAV or data profile is 88.30 out of 100. Since 1969, wide receivers with an 80 to 89 data score, taken in the top of the second round, typically picks 33 to 50, are as follows. You have Aurelius Ben, Debo Samuel, Jordy Nelson, Michael Pittman Jr., Dorial Green Beckham, T. Higgins, Ricky Watts, Zay Jones, Ryan Yarborough, Justin Hunter, Eric Richardson, Jerry Levias, Jonathan Mingo, Elijah Moore, and Gordon Jones. So all those wide receivers are wide receivers who tested almost exactly like Coleman. They had the same sort of collection of talents, I guess, in terms of on paper that Coleman had for the most part. And it's kind of a mixed bag. It kind of is. It's a mismatch of different starters to backups. But there's some decent upside potential with Coleman, based on some of the names that I mentioned. But with that list and additional wide receiver information, we can formulate a year one potential based on the current roster. So first off, taking a look at the Bills team because, what team is he going on? Because that could definitely be a variable that can affect his potential. The team he's going on is the Bills. The Bills ended 2023 with a pretty decent offense. They were ranked 83.99 out of 100 in terms of offensive single ranking score, which is a score from Pro Football Reference. Josh Allen also had a QBR percentile score of 59.88 out of 100. So again, that's not his actual QBR. That's his QBR compared to his peers over the last 10 years. And then Allen's also since 2020, he's averaged about a 72.45 out of 100. So he kind of had a down year or below average season last year for his QBR, which could improve with more weapons like Keon Coleman. So, Josh Allen, of course, is definitely considered top 5, top 10 quarterback in the NFL. But how much does the quarterback and offense a wide receiver lands in affect his year one production? Well, for those of you that have seen this show recently, you already know that you're going to learn some stuff you already know, but this is what it is. So taking a look at the parameters that were just set, these are all the wide receivers that Keon Coleman tested like in terms of the year one, year two, and year three market share of the NFL offense they were in. It compares them to the quarterbacks that they had year one, year two, and year three based on the QBR of that season. It also looks at the OSRS, which is the offensive single ranking system to see how great of an offense they were in. And for the most part, when you look at the statistics here, there is no real correlation between the quarterback that a wide receiver has in year one and their NFL market share. So what does that mean? It means that there is no causation or correlation, which correlation isn't always causation, but there's no correlation between the wide receiver going to a team with a great quarterback and actually having great production. Okay, a lot of it really comes down to the actual wide receiver's ability to adapt and adjust to the NFL, not the fact that he has Peyton Manning, so all of a sudden he's going to be good. You can't think like that, people. It really comes down to the talent of the wide receiver and his ability to play. Similar situation, of course, at the offensive side of things. So what this means is simply this, whether Coleman succeeds in 2024 or not, it's not dependent on the offense he is in or the quarterback that he has. So Josh Allen is not going to make or break Keon Coleman. He's not, the offense of the Bills is not going to make or break Keon Coleman. The only thing that's going to break Keon Coleman or make him a star or not is Keon Coleman. I mean, let's be real here. That's what it is, and the data backs that statement up. So there are other variables at play in terms of year one wide receiver production. And as much as we like to think that the quarterback has everything to do with it, or this situation was great for him, and all that kind of stuff, it really just comes down to the talent and the ability of that wide receiver to translate is really what it comes down to. Now, one last stop before we get into some more team analysis here. Typically 1 year wide receivers based on the data parameters. So when you look at all the wide receivers I mentioned before, based on those parameters, they typically average 61 percentile in terms of their year one rookie contributions, which is not that great. Year two, 65 percentile, and then year three, 55 percentile. So for the most part, you're looking at a guy who's kind of like a coin flip. He really is as a wide receiver. And there's nothing wrong with that because most NFL teams, you're drafting players where it's worse than that in terms of your odds and probability. But in this case, that's what Keon Coleman is. He's a little bit of a coin flip. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but that definitely is kind of where he is based on his overall data. He could go either way. He could be a bust. He could be a backup. He could be a starter. He could be a star player. That's kind of where he's at, and there's nothing wrong with that. But just this is just the reality for you. This is the expectation you really should have for him in year one, year two, and year three, based on the data that he's put up. So it's you know, this is why some people say data people are pessimistic because when you look at the numbers, you go, wow, probability wise, not that great. And it doesn't matter where you're drafted. You could be drafted in the first round, and your probability could be interesting. Then, of course, we get to the Buffalo Bills offensive roster data. So this is how it's stacking up. Josh Allen, of course, coming back. He's shown to be a top five quarterback. I think that might continue. Definitely has a good shot. James Cook, of course, has put in some good contributions. Not the best running back. There are some inefficiencies in his game, but he gets the job done. Keon Coleman, of course, is coming in here. Khalil Shakir um, is. We don't really know what he is yet. I was going to do a video on him possibly in the future to kind of highlight some things, but he's a bit of a mixed bag. I don't know if it really warrants it. If you want to see that video, if you want me to make a video about Khalil Shakir in terms of his breakout potential, definitely leave a comment below about that, and I'll try to do that. But he's definitely interesting, but I'm not 100% sold on him yet. Then you have Curtis Samuel, of course, who's kind of a journeyman wide receiver who's kind of hit or miss. His efficiency is not the best, 31 percentile in terms of his efficiency as a wide receiver. Dalton Kincaid has been great tight end there, and of course the offensive line has been lights out as well. Only weaknesses maybe the Connor McGovern and David Edwards are good but not great, but still decent overall. So again, this Bills offense is going to be good. They lost Stephon Diggs, but Diggs wasn't the most efficient wide receiver ever, despite the fact of getting as many targets as he did. So this is going to be opportunity for them to focus more on wide receivers that can make plays, if you will, or at least more efficient plays. Which that's something at least Shakir has, as he was 90 percentile in terms of his efficiency as a wide receiver. So that's going to be something to see, and we'll see what Keon Coleman does. But with that, you have to also go to the schedule. So this is going to be the Bills' schedule. This is going to be what Keon Coleman is going to be facing this year in terms of defenses. So pay attention, people. So for the most part, it's pretty on par with a few mismatches mid-season early. But for the most part, it's a solid schedule. It's not super tough. It's not super easy either. You do have some blowout potential in those games in the middle, like with the Tennessee Titans and the Miami Dolphins and the Colts and the Seattle Seahawks. But for the most part, it's pretty solid overall, I would say. Now, when you get to the Week 1 matchup with the Arizona Cardinals, I think this is a good matchup. I think when you look at the cornerbacks that they have, Garrett Williams, Sean Murphy Bunting are not shut down corners. They're just guys. So because of that, I think there are some opportunities for Keon Coleman to do well in this game, especially being like the second or third option. Then, of course, you get to the Miami Dolphins. They kind of reworked their defense overall. They have some decent secondary pieces, Jordan Poyer, of course, and Jalen Ramsey, but those guys are older now, especially Ramsey. Ramsey's 30, Poyer's 33. There is a chance, very good chance, that they kind of lost a step. And then the nickel cornerback for Miami is Kadir, and Cater had an 8 percentile data grade coming out, and he's 55 percentile in terms of his NFL production. So I don't see this as a great, or I would say, issue in terms of this game. Now, of course, you get to the Jacksonville Jaguars. They have some secondary pieces that are solid, but they could be had. They really could. They've been inconsistent in a lot of ways. So I think this is definitely something where they could have some good games here. And of course, you get to the Buffalo Bills in Week 4. Well, actually, I think this would be the Baltimore Ravens in Week 4. They have some solid matchups here, but definitely a winnable game for them as well. And then, of course, you get the Houston Texans in Week 5. This is going to be an interesting game because the secondary is a little suspect. Jeff Kudik, Kamari Lassiter are not the fastest cats ever, and we'll see what happens. They might do well against possession receivers. So Keon Coleman being a possession receiver might be the ticket to really show some interesting things here. But this is kind of how those matchups go. And the pass rushers are really the biggest concern on the Houston Texans with Will Anderson Jr. and Daniel Hunter there. So that's going to be something to see, of course. Week 6, you got the Jets. Based on everything, they have a solid secondary. Weak areas, DJ Reed, Michael Carter II, kind of the weak links there, but pretty solid defense. Winnable. Definitely have some matchups they could take advantage of, but I'll be interested to see who they put Sauce on. If they put him on Keon Coleman, if they put him on somebody else. We'll kind of see what happens in that game, but that's definitely an interesting game. Then, of course, you get the Tennessee Titans. They reworked their secondary as well, but still, they have L'Jarius Sneed, and then Roger McCreary, and then you got Chidobe Awuzie, who's kind of a journeyman cornerback, can be had. Elijah Molden can be had, and Amani Hooker can be had. So that's just is what it is with this matchup. Week 8, Seattle Seahawks. They're reworking their defense. They have some issues in terms of their defensive tackle area, but definitely something that is definitely winnable here. Then, of course, you get the Miami Dolphins again. Again, same sentiments can be had. Do have some players here that are not the best, so definitely kind of a mismatch where the Bills will have an offensive advantage in this game. Then, of course, you get to the Colts. Their secondary is hit or miss. Some good players, some bad players, but definitely uh, you can take advantage of them. Then, of course, you get the Kansas City Chiefs. They have great pass rushers, but the secondary is being reworked. They lost some people in the offseason. L'Jarius Sneed, of course, is gone. So they're going to be playing some catch up here. So I don't know how good they're going to be this year, but they do. The pass rush is going to be much better than their secondary, I'll just say that much. So there will be opportunities to really do well in this game offensively. Then, of course, you get to the San Francisco 49ers with Nick Bosa and, of course, Leonard Floyd. Solid front seven. Secondary is a little hit or miss. So another game where they could have some opportunities to make some plays. Then, of course, you get the Los Angeles Rams. They are reworking their defense as well. So we don't really know how good they're going to be, especially in the front seven. But they have the opportunity to be good, but their overall data is a bit of a mismatch kind of thing, and their secondary is a little hit or miss. Then, of course, we get to week 15 with the Detroit Lions. In terms of their data, they're young, but they do have potential to be really good. So I will be excited to kind of see what happens with them, but their secondary has potential to be very good. But this is a really interesting matchup to kind of see how they do against this team that I see in terms of data being one of the better defenses in the NFL. We'll see what happens, but they do have the potential to be that next year. Then, of course, we get to the New England Patriots. Christian Gonzalez, of course, has yet to really show he's a special player. He had great data coming out, but he was a 39 percentile guy in terms of his ability to stop plays in the pass, in terms of his pass defense statistics. So he's somebody that I think he could step up and be really good. He also could be a bit of a bust if he doesn't improve. But these are kind of things you could be facing in this matchup. Then, of course, you get to the New York Jets again. Similar situation, similar sentiments as before with them. And then, of course, you end with the Patriots in Week 18, where they will have some matchups where they could do really well too. So, weird schedule in terms of how it was made. I mean, you're playing the Patriots, and then a couple weeks later, you're playing them again late in the season. So, but I think Coleman has opportunity to do well against the schedule and the Bills. In terms of looking at overall outlook for him, I would say Keon Coleman has been a controversial prospect in 2024, but all this controversy can die if he has a serviceable rookie season. So, what is a sensible start for Coleman? Well, it's simply this: 70 to 80 percentile. If he can put up 70 to 80 percentile in year one, followed by an 80 to 90 percentile year in year two, I think you can clearly say that he's making it. If he doesn't do that, if he has a 50 percentile year, or pulls a Jordy Nelson, where Jordy Nelson kind of didn't do anything for 3 seasons and then finally caught on in the fourth year, then you would have some concerns. But for the most part, I do think he has opportunity to do some interesting things this year and kind of see what happens. The floor for Coleman, so based on all the situations that I just mentioned, the floor for him would be 56 percentile, and then the ceiling would be 86 for his rookie year. If you currently own Coleman, I would hold on to him unless he doesn't break out in year two. Year three breakdown would be the very rare situation where, if he doesn't break out in year one and he doesn't break out in year two, move on, cut bait. If you still believe in him, keep him for year three, but by that time, you probably would have lost all value in him at that point. So, in terms of, letting him go. So, the sunk cost, if you will, would be to the point where you just got to move on from a man. But that's just kind of how it is with him. So overall, that's my overall outlook for Coleman. I think shoot for 70 to 80 percentile in year one, then improves in year two. I don't see him having like a crazy bonkers rookie season. He could, but he was a little bit raw on film and everything else like that. So I think it might take a little bit of time before he does that, but definitely is an interesting prospect. And I want to know in the description box below, how do you guys feel about Keon Coleman? Do you like him? Do you hate him? How would you rank him in your wide receiver rankings? And with all that stuff out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Jim Coburn. You can check out my other work at patreon.com/jcoburn. Also check out my X, formerly known as Twitter account at Geometrics. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.